9:59. We got to be getting close. It's 10 o'clock. Good morning and welcome to the R.O. Pope Bible class. We welcome all who are here in person along with our friends listening on WGOS 1070 AM and Facebook Live. As always, we invite everyone to attend the service live in the Christian Enrichment Center at Memorial United Methodist Church in Thomasville, North Carolina. This morning, we will start with the hymn found on 310, The Solid Rock. As Rob Williams comes up to do our morning prayer this morning, let's continue to keep Ann Rankin, Milton Riley, Bill Mills, and Carrie Eanes in our prayers this morning. Rob.
Good morning. Many of you were like me at Sam Nelson's funeral yesterday, and I was struck by a couple things that were brought up. Rodney spoke about the church and how that kind of molded Sam, this church, this actual being here, and the people that, he saw and grew up with. And then Coach Brown talked about the importance of family and the support that you need to give you confidence to overcome obstacles and hard times in your life. And that made me think about my time when I was young here. And I heard Shelton singing, and it made me think of, what was that song? Was it Vista or, that you used to lead? And I remember playing ping pong with Ron Berry up in Mount Shepherd. And it made me very thankful when I reflected on that. So let us pray. Dear God, we thank you so much for this place, but more importantly, the people that are in it. We thank you for their willingness to serve through the years and be an inspiration to others. We thank you for the love that we feel when we come here and that we know that we are supported when times get tough. And we thank you so much that you have inspired others and people here to live a life that is pleasing to you and is meaningful to others. Please open our hearts to live this week in a way that would be pleasing to you. Amen.
Thank you, Rob. We having a birthday this week. We have Linda Childers this Saturday, the 4th. And celebrating an anniversary this week are Jack and Martha Bolton on February 3rd. I have 2 announcements this week. The Lent lunch schedule has been set. We're going to do Lent lunches every Sunday in Lent this year. And I'm pleased to say that the R.O. Pope class is going to do the first lunch on February 26th. The proceeds will be going towards our Rise Against Hunger event happening on April 26th. Circulating around the room right now is a lunch and sign-up sheet. Please sign up and support this worthy cause. And we're still selling pancake tickets if somebody needs one. See Mayor Dr. David Williams. The 5th Sunday of the month means I have the pleasure to introduce Stan Stiers as our teacher this morning. Stan?
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Good morning. Hope everybody's well this morning, and good to see you, and always good to be here. I mean, heck, it's good to be anywhere, to tell you the truth. You know, when I think about the great lineup of teachers in the R.L. Pope class, not only over the years, but during this present time right now, I feel a little bit like the mule that was entered in the Kentucky Derby. Somebody asked the mule's owner, said, why would you enter a mule in the Kentucky Derby? And the owner said, well, I thought the fellowship might do him some good. So I'm here for the fellowship this morning and hope you are too, and maybe something good will come out of the lesson. It is January, and the new year tends to be a time of reflection, of thinking about the future, and also reflecting upon the past sometimes. And for me personally, it's been extra special because I've had COVID twice since Thanksgiving and a birthday to boot. So a lot of heavy stuff weighing on my brain here over the last couple of months. I've had the opportunity to do some reflecting, and you know, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And so I've tried to make Socrates proud recently. One of the things that I've thought about and reminded just the other night at the YMCA Awards dinner was just how fortunate I've been to have 2 great careers, doing what I did and enjoying the people and the place that I did it. It was a real pleasure. And that sort of led me to thinking about the last thing I did at the Y was I went to the General Assembly, which is held every 4 years. And at this particular General Assembly, the last one I went to, the last day of the conference, Max Lucado brought the keynote address. And what he said hit home pretty strong with me. And I went out and bought the book that he was referring to and read it, and it meant a lot to me. And his talk was entitled, "The Cure for the Common Life." And so what I thought would be good this morning would just be revisit the main points of that book, because for me, it's a little light-hearted, but it's also got a point to it, and I'll try to share those points with you. I'm no Max Lucado, but I'll try to do him justice here in The Cure for the Common Life. He uses a great metaphor to drive his primary theme home. it's the sweet spot. If you've ever played golf or tennis or baseball, you probably know that term. It's that place on the head of the golf club or the tennis racket or the baseball bat where if you strike it, the ball travels far and it travels relatively straight. The sweet spot is, for an athlete, is sort of like prime real estate, if you will. Location, location, location. And great athletes are able to find that sweet spot very often. Tiger Woods used to do it. Albert Pujols did it. Michael Jordan, with his jump shot, would find a sweet spot. And I think the other side of that is if you miss hit sometime with the golf club or the baseball bat, you end up with an awful feeling in you going up to your shoulder. It tingles a little bit. It doesn't feel very good. So it's anything but sweet. Sports are a metaphor for life, I think, a lot of times. And we want to live our lives in a sweet spot, don't we? You know, your husband remembers your anniversary. The tax refund comes early. The kids never talk back. You always find yourself in the fastest checkout line at the grocery store. Life in a sweet spot is sort of like a downhill bicycle ride. Things go well. Miss the sweet spot and things don't always go so well. You become discouraged and sometimes you want to give up. And Max Lucado, his point in his book is each of us, you and I, have a sweet spot, a zone in which we're designed to live. And I think as we look around us, we might say that there's some people that haven't found theirs yet. The studies show that 1/3 of Americans hate their jobs, and 80% of people on the work site are unenthused about their careers, unenthused. It's no coincidence that most suicides take place on Sunday night and most heart attacks occur on Monday morning than at any other time. So how do we find that sweet spot? And Max Lucado says the answer lies in one sentence. Use your uniqueness to make a big deal out of God every day. Use your uniqueness to make a big deal out of God every day. So let's start with that idea about your uniqueness. You know, think about it. Leonardo da Vinci painted how many Mona Lisas? One. Beethoven wrote how many Fifth Symphonies? One. God made one version of us. And for you, you're it. I mean, you are what God created. You're the only shot we have at you. And if you aren't you, then we don't get God's creation, do we? We don't get you. You can do something that no one else can do. And the way that you do it is unique to you. You're more than a coincidence of chromosomes, more than just heredity, but each of us are uniquely made. I've heard it said, and perhaps you have too, and I've said it myself to others from time to time. You know, you can be anything that you want to be. But if you stop and think about that, you have to ask the question is, well, can you really be anything that you want to be? If you're uniquely made, and think about this, can you really be anything other than what you were made to be? I mean, if you don't love dirt, can you be a farmer? If you don't love kids and have the patience of Job, can you be a kindergarten teacher? If working with numbers is boring to you, can you really be an accountant? And you're saying, well, yeah, you can. An unhappy one, an unsatisfied one. You can be one of the 80% who don't feel enthusiasm for their work, mainly because you're not using your talents in your job to be the person that you were created to be. We can all be statistics, but can we be anything we want? Well, if we're going to be everything that God created us to be, the answer is probably not. Max Lucado says, you can be everything that God created you to be, however. And we become that by discovering our uniqueness. Well, how do we do that? How do we discover what makes us different from anyone else who has ever lived and who ever will live? And it's pretty simple. You read your life backwards. I don't know who it was, Rob. It was Nietzsche or Kierkegaard or somebody, C.S. Lewis, or somebody said, we live our lives forward, but we understand them by looking backwards. And so that's what Max Lucado says we need to do to figure out who we are uniquely made to be. Read our life backwards. Look back over your life and find those moments where satisfaction intersects with success. Satisfaction intersects with success. You look for those moments when you did something you loved to do and you did it so well that you wanted to do it again. You have those intersections, I guarantee you. The day after lunch or sometime when you got time, you don't not do anything else, watching the ball game, take out a piece of paper and think back to when you were young, or younger, maybe is a better way of putting it, and think about the things that from your childhood or your high school years, excuse me, brought you those moments of satisfaction and success. Analyze your best days as a young adult. And after you've written it down, then go back and circle all the verbs that you used to describe that. Were you fixing or creating or organizing or helping or leading? Circle that verb or those verbs that indicated what you did. And then circle the nouns. Were you working with numbers or colors or chemicals or systems or people or medicines? Do you note any common themes there? Do you find yourself always doing the same things when you were happy and successful in what you were doing? And why not? Because that's what comes easily to us. And then what was the situation that you were in? What was the environment you were doing these things in which you were finding success and satisfaction? Did you like order and structure and everything being real neat and the place, everything having its place? Or did you enjoy things being a little unpredictable? You know, you didn't mind a little topsy-turvy roller coaster in your life. Do you love being on a team or in a group? Or did your intersections of success and satisfaction come independent of other people? Did you find yourself just dying to lead others and jump in and take the lead in a project or something that was being done? And then finally, what was it that made you say, yes, yes? What was that? You may remember the movie Chariots of Fire. Anybody remember that? A couple heads nodding here. There was the lead guy in there was a runner named Eric Liddell. Spelled his name Liddell, British, I think, or Scottish maybe. He was explaining his devotion to running to his sister, who wanted him to stop running and become a missionary with her. And Eric told her, he said, God made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. When I run, I feel his pleasure. So this morning, when do you feel God's pleasure? When do you look up to the heavens and say, I was made to do this? Where do your strengths and interests and optimal conditions meet to make you want to say, yes? You can do something that no one else can do in a way that no one else can do it. And so we read in 1 Peter, if anyone ministers, let him do it with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified. I like it in the book Max Lucado talks about, he says, a frog can flap its legs all day long and never fly. It can hang out with birds and look up to birds as mentors and heroes, but never get off the ground. We can be like those frogs, and many of us have been flapping for way too long. But enough of the bird brain thinking, just go ahead and be a dead-gone frog. It's okay to jump. That's why you have those big thighs. So get hopping. So the first step in finding that sweet spot in our lives is to find our personal zone, our God-given uniqueness, and there we'll begin to discover the cure for the common life. But don't stop there. If you really want to sweeten the spot, then here's what you do. You use your unique strengths to make a big deal out of God. You use your unique strengths to make a big deal out of God. Many people have discovered their strengths and use them to advance their own goals, not in harmony with God, but in a selfish way. We can think of people who probably qualify in that category. But make a big deal out of God by using your talents for God's purposes. Cato says that's really why we're here on earth. The reason God gave us a pulse, the reason God gave us breath, the reason we have these aptitudes and insights we discover when we look at our life backwards is to make a big deal out of life and therefore out of our Creator. Many people find their sweet spot and make a big deal out of themselves. As a culture, we tend to be like that. Max Lucado tells a story of a businessman who would stop by a popcorn stand every day after lunch for a bag of corn. And one day he stopped by and the popcorn seller was closing up his stand at noon. "What's wrong?" the businessman asked him. "And nothing," said the peddler. "Well, then why are you closing at noon?" "Well, so I can go home and sit on my porch and sip tea with my wife." "But the day is still young. You can sell a lot more popcorn." "I don't need to. I've got enough money for today." "Enough? That's absurd. You should keep working." "And why should I keep working?" "To sell more popcorn." "And why sell more popcorn?" "Because the more popcorn you sell, the more money you make. And the more money you make, the richer you are. And the richer you are, the more popcorn stands you can buy. And the more stands, the more popcorn you can sell, and the richer you become. And then when you have enough, you can stop working and sell your popcorn stands and stay home, sit on the porch with your wife, and sip tea." The popcorn man smiled and said, "I can do that today. I guess I've had enough." But when's the last time you heard someone say, "I've had enough. I'm rich enough. I have enough possessions"? We're a nation of having it all. I think we have 1 out of 5 families have 3 cars or more in the family. We spend more in 1 year on garbage bags than about 90 of 210 countries in the world spend on for everything. We have twice as many shopping centers as we do high schools, but we pay a price for that. Who can satisfy Madison Avenue? And of course the answer is nobody can. Well, the result of our greed is often arrogance and meaninglessness. And Lucado says that people who make a big deal out of themselves have a version of eyesight, poor eyesight, with eye not being this, but the letter I. I can do anything. And he says the people that have poor eyesight have 2 versions of it. One is, I can do anything I want to do, by gosh. And the second is, I can't do anything. The people who are breathing the heavy swamp air of self-defeat. 2 extremes of poor eyesight are self-loving and self-loathing. And sometimes we swing back and forth between the 2, but neither one is where the sweet spot is. Right in the middle of it is between I can do everything and I can't do anything, is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Not self-secure, not insecure, but God-secure. Well, how do we get there then? Lucado says the way we do it is through worship. Because when we worship in the honest way, we take our eyes off ourselves and place them on God. Worship gives God the honor, and it can happen every day in every deed. We can make a big deal on Sunday through our songs and presence, and a big deal on Monday with those strengths that we all have. And those who use their sweet spot to make a big deal out of God, that's when life becomes sweet. It happens when we invest our talents in ways that honor God, because we know that God is the source of those talents. Use our uniqueness to make a big deal out of God. And then finally, do it every day. Do it every day. You do the most what you do the best, is the way Lucado puts it. You find your sweet spot, you stay there doing the most what you do the best. That's what God made us to do, whatever the best may be. And it's different for each one of us. If it's taking care of fruit or taking care of kids, if it's writing books or writing speeding tickets, if you're managing a store, if you're managing the books for the store, whatever you're doing, if you're doing the most, what you do the best, and you're doing it every day of your life, then you're discovering the cure for the common life. You know, Michelangelo was invited to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And the story is, at least, that at first he didn't really want to. He resisted the invitation. Because what he really loved to do was to sculpt. And he just didn't see himself happy up there in the ceiling on a bunch of scaffolding, painting. But, you know, when the Pope calls, you know, what do you do? So he planned the work about 3 or 4 months. He had mapped out 12 figures he was going to draw on the Sistine Chapel. How many of you been to Sistine Chapel? They move you through so fast, you know, you don't hardly have time to see it all. But we know what he ended up with, instead of 12 figures on the ceiling, was 409 figures in 12 different scenes, or 9 different scenes. Spent nearly 4 years painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He worked night and day. It almost cost him his health. But he persevered, and in so doing, changed the world of art forever. Why did he change from being unenthused to becoming very passionate about his work? I think the answer might be found in the answer that Michelangelo gave to somebody who asked him, why do you focus so much attention on the details up in the corners up in there? Nobody's ever going to see them. And Michelangelo's response was, God will. What if everybody worked with God in mind? Suppose no one worked to please self or the bottom line, but everyone worked to please God, and in so doing served others. We know some occupations that would probably cease to exist pretty quickly. Certain careers, by their nature, would cease. I mean, if I'm repairing a car for God, I'm not going to overcharge God's children. If I'm painting a house for God, I'm not going to use paint thinner. I've shared with you before that Shelton and I experienced this in practice one time when we had some computer problems. And we spent some time with Duncan Johnson. Duncan is Janet Smith's brother. And he was at our house. He was helping us with our computers. He was setting us up with a backup system for our files and installing some software to block viruses and spyware. He was fixing this over here, and he'd spend some time and adjust that. And he was loving every minute of it. You could just tell. He used to work in corporate America, and he took a risk and went out on his own doing what he does best. And his website is triadgeek.com, so he is a self-confessed geek. But he was so patient with us in his our technological ignorance. He was very kind and patient with us as we asked dumb questions, and his bill was very reasonable. And as we talked and we watched him work, we could see the sweet spot written all over his face. Now, I didn't know Duncan's theology at the time, and I still don't, but I think I know his heart. He was making a big deal out of God, not by his words, but by his deeds. Imagine if everyone worked for an audience of one. Every nurse thoughtful, every policeman careful, every teacher hopeful. Impossible, you might say? Maybe not. What Max Lucado says is all we need is for a few people to start a worldwide revolution. And so here we are at Memorial, wanting a cure for the common life. So why shouldn't that be us? Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Always a pleasure having you. Next, let's see. Our teacher next Sunday will be Jim McGee. If you would bow with me for our closing prayer. O Lord, clothe us in Christ so that we may live as true disciples, experiencing the grace that transforms lives. In Jesus' name, we humbly pray. Amen.